It was early, really early, 4:30 a.m., but Jodi Huisentruit was already running late for work. The morning anchor rushed out of her apartment, carrying all of the things that she needed to get ready and go on air. Her car was parked here, only 12 steps from her apartment door, but she never made it to the car. Jodi was abducted from this parking lot and taken, screaming into the darkness. When Mason City police arrived on the scene nearly 3 hours later, it was immediately apparent that there had been an abduction. Jodi's bright red high heeled shoes were tossed haphazardly. There were signs of a struggle, drag marks, a bent car key. Jodi's hairspray, blow dryer, and earrings were scattered. And Jodi was gone, never to be seen again. Though many years have passed, we still don't know what happened to Jodi Huisentruit. She had told friends that she thought someone had been following her. She had felt it while rollerblading, and once while she was jogging, she had been sure that she was being followed by a black pickup truck with dark windows. Jodi told her friends and colleagues about the incident. She enrolled in a self-defense class in the spring of 1995, and at class, she told the instructor that she was there because of an uncomfortable incident. Police interviewed Jodi's neighbors, and at least 3 people reported hearing a scream around 4:30 a.m. But no one had called police. No one suspected that something this terrible had happened. But it had, and whoever had taken Jodi had a 3-hour head start. Groups were quickly assembled, and the immediate area was searched. Several teams of search and rescue dogs were called in. That first day, they focused on the area closest to her apartment, particularly this nearby park and the Winnebago River that runs through it. Search dogs hit along the riverbank, but there was nothing on the riverbed, no evidence found in the water, and nothing of note in the park. In fact, according to police, from day one, there were no concrete leads. Mason City, Iowa is a small town of only about 30,000 residents, but Jodi Huisentruit was a big name in this small town. She was the morning and noon anchor at Mason City's only TV news station, KIMT. The station was less than 2 miles from her apartment, and while Jodi would have driven her car there, you and I are walking to it now. Jodi had moved to Mason City in November of 1993 and had really gotten involved in the community. The mayor, Carl Miller, spoke highly of her, calling her a true celebrity in this city. For nearly 2 years, thousands of people had welcomed her into their home every morning via their television set. Jodi's fame created an immense challenge for investigators and publicly highlighted some of the dangers of being featured in the media. Everybody knows who you are when you're on TV. Even as a child, Jodi had known that she wanted to be on television. Back in her home state of Minnesota, she had grown up the youngest of 3 girls. Her family referred to her as Sunshine. She was happy, courageous, and driven. She loved to be active and enjoyed many various sports, including water skiing and golf. Her friends described the 27-year-old as outgoing, goofy, and joyful. She had been voted class clown at her high school. Her boss at the news station described her as lively, popular with viewers, and super responsible. Jodi Huisentruit had never missed work before, though she had slept in a few times. As a local celebrity, Jodi had spent the day before her abduction at a charity golf tournament in town. She had arrived after work and left the event after the awards dinner, telling another golfer that she had an early day the next day, which was not an exaggeration. She routinely had to be at work at 3 a.m., so this statement made a lot of sense to people. Attendees at the tournament said that Jodi behaved normally, but also said that she told them that she was planning on changing her phone number because she had received some undesirable calls to her landline. Now, police were able to get the outgoing calls from Jodi's apartment, but I don't know that they have the records for calls coming in. It would be interesting to know if officials have any idea who was making those fishy phone calls that she was getting. But we do know that they have record of the calls that she made, because they have confirmed a call that night that came from Jodi at her apartment. It was to a friend named Kelly who lived in Mississippi. Unfortunately, Jodi didn't get the chance to talk to Kelly, but Kelly's husband said that everything seemed normal that night and that Jodi sounded happy. The ambitious anchor usually reported to work between 3 and 4 a.m. However, on this morning, she'd slept in. Her producer, Amy Coons, noticed that Jodi was late at around 4 and called her. Jodi sounded like she'd been asleep, but told Amy that she'd be right there. But as time passed, Jodi did not arrive. Amy continued to write and produce the morning show alone. She tried calling again after 5 o'clock, but this time Jodi didn't answer. Amy went on air at 6 that morning by herself. KIMT is a small station, barely staffed in the early mornings. But as soon as creative services employee Dave arrived at 6:30, Amy told him that Jodi wasn't in and that she was worried. She asked him to call the police to check on her. When authorities arrived, they immediately suspected foul play and did not waste any time starting the search. While the official word was that there were no leads in that first day, several things had been uncovered. Jodi, as well as her purse and briefcase, were missing. Her car, a 1991 red Mazda Miata, was still in the parking lot. It was new to Jodi. She had bought it just 3 weeks before. Notably, the vehicle had a keyless entry system, meaning that she didn't have to put the key into the door to open it. With her arms full of items to take with her to work, her hairspray, blow dryer, and such, she would have likely used the remote unlock feature. And this means that the bent key found on the ground may have been bent in the process of fighting back against her attacker, as opposed to bent while she attempted entry into the car itself. With all of the items left on the ground, it is believed that Jodi did not make it into her car at all that morning. The vehicle is towed for analysis, and a partial palm print, not belonging to Jodi or any known persons, is found on the car. Nearly 20 years later, police will also tell Nancy Grace that a hair was found. Now, they don't say where this hair was found, but they imply that its presence is significant. An inspection of Jodi's apartment seemed to confirm their suspicions that the confrontation had only occurred outdoors. There was nothing stolen, nothing rifled through, disturbed, or toppled in her apartment. Yes, maybe the kitchen table was a little messy, but that was normal. Cluttered might be a better word. These images of Jodi's apartment in the days after her abduction were shared by 48 Hours. It looks like a place that she crashed in the evenings and raced out of in the mornings on her way to work. Not the place where a conflict had started. But there were a few things that made investigators question whether or not she had been alone that morning in her apartment. First, the toilet seat was found up. This seems almost trivial enough to not mention. Maybe Jodi had been cleaning the night before or gotten sick. But as a female that lived alone, a raised toilet seat seemed like it could be evidence of a male visitor. Second, several empty 16-ounce Bud Light beer cans were found in the apartment. Now, Jodi did drink beer, but apparently not Bud Light. I'm not sure why exactly, but interviews with Jodi's friends indicated that this wasn't something that she would have bought herself. Again, maybe they're nothing, but maybe they're evidence of a visitor. I am curious to know if those cans were dusted for prints and compared to the palm print found on her car. But as best I can tell, that information is unknown to the public. That morning, while detectives are on the scene searching for evidence and looking for Jodi, Jodi's friend, John Vansice, walks up. He had actually lived in the Key Apartments the previous year, and he came up and allegedly says to investigators that he was the last person to see Jodi alive. And reports are a little conflicting on this. If these are really the words he used, that sounds awfully suspicious, because Jodi is just barely missing at this time. But he does go on and say that she had stopped by his apartment the night before to watch a videotape of the surprise 27th birthday party that he'd thrown for her earlier that month. Here's a picture from that party. John and Jodi were pretty good friends. They had spent a lot of time together. They shared a love of water sports and the lake. They had just spent the previous weekend together with some other friends water skiing in Iowa City. Now, Jodi did not have a boyfriend, and she told her other friends that there was nothing romantic going on with John. But some of those friends did find their relationship a little suspicious. John was more than 20 years older than Jodi, and they thought that potentially he did have romantic aspirations for her. In fact, he had named his boat after her. John denies that they were anything other than friends, and in the week following her abduction, he told KIMT reporter Robin Wolfram that Jodi was like a daughter to him. He also said that police had interviewed him twice, he had passed a polygraph, and received no indication that he was a suspect. Iowa DCI and the FBI joined Mason City officers on the second day of the search for Jodi. They went through her office at work, pored over the diary found in her apartment. Officials held a press conference to ask for any witnesses to come forward. They were very clear with the public that while few clues have been recovered, they suspected foul play. Authorities canvassed the neighborhood and spread the search further from her apartment, expanding eventually to miles from where she was taken. While speaking with people in homes nearby, they came across their best lead so far. A man named Randy Linderman lived on Jodi Street, and he told police that he had seen a light-colored van parked in Jodi's parking lot while he was on his way to work that morning, just before 4 a.m. It had been running with its parking lights on, which drew Randy's attention to it. Not many people were up and awake at that time. The van was described by authorities as a mid-1980s white Ford Ecoline van. It was not registered to anyone at the apartment complex. They asked for the driver to come forward, but no one did. On Saturday, July 1st, 5 days after her abduction, Jodi missed a wedding back home in Minnesota where she had planned to be a bridesmaid. That weekend, police used helicopters equipped with heat sensors to look for her. But with no favorable results, both the ground and air searches are called off 2 days later. Hope was still high though, and posters and yellow ribbons went up all over Mason City. A reward fund for information was started and quickly grew to over $30,000. Due to her local fame and extreme visibility within the community, the search for Jodi quickly became national news. Her case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries and 48 Hours. Police received hundreds of leads from all over the nation. Authorities described many of them as unuseful rumors, but they took the time to slowly rule these rumors out. 1 month into their investigation, Police Chief Sleeper said that they had tracked down over 300 white vans thanks to tips from the public, as well as another 600 checked through vehicle registrations. When police heard about the jogging incident, from interviews with Jodi's friends, they also cross-reference black pickup truck registrations with criminal records, but unfortunately turned up nothing. Years later, another jogging witness will come forward to the Find Jodi team. Find Jodi is a non-profit volunteer group created in 2003. The organization has done extensive research into the case and worked to publicize the known facts, hoping to get answers about what happened and, as they say, find Jodi. They speak with a jogger who was nearly hit by a car early that morning. It was speeding by her with no lights on in the early morning. But unfortunately, in that dim morning light, the make and model of this vehicle is still unknown. The Find Jodi team also learned from key apartment residents that they had occasionally found stacks of empty beer cans in the parking lot near Jodi's apartment, as if someone was hanging out there, drinking and watching Jodi through her ground floor windows. In 1995, though, Chief Schleifer downplayed the possibility of a stalker. When asked about it by the media, he said, "We've heard that from a lot of people, but we have nothing to substantiate it." Special Agent John Lang with the Iowa DCI, however, quickly contradicted that statement. He told a writer with the Associated Press that he believed that the culprit had been clearly watching Jodi. He said they would have had to have stalked her for at least a short time to know her pattern. Jodi's family is just devastated by the loss of Jodi and also frustrated with the contradictions and the slow pace of the police department. They hire a private investigator pretty quickly in early September, and one of the sources I found said that they hired 2 more by the end of that fall. Patrick McCarthy, one of the private investigators hired by the family to assist in the investigation, spoke with the media, and he said, "We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort talking to people who knew Jodi and spent time with Jodi. We located nothing in her private life that would have put her at risk at all. No dark side to Jodi. She was as real and all-American as she appeared to those who knew her and to her viewers." And this quote addresses one of the many theories surrounding Jodi Huisentruit's abduction: drugs. There have been some rumors that Jodi was taking drugs to help maintain her busy life and hectic sleep schedule. One of her coworkers may have started these rumors, saying in an interview once that it was possible that Jodi had occasional mood swings and would keep late hours out drinking or partying with friends and then still get up at 3 in the morning to work. The idea being that if Jodi was taking drugs to stay awake, she was also associating with dangerous people to attain these drugs and put herself in the position to be kidnapped by getting caught up in something illegal. However, there were also reports of Jodi occasionally sleeping in or even dozing off once while at work. The private detectives didn't find any evidence of drugs in her life, and police, who had access to her apartment immediately that day, never allude to any leads of this kind either. So it seems to me to be not a very likely theory. Very few people believe that Jodi had run away. News director at KIMT Doug Murbach said she would never do that to her mother, calling her super responsible and super reliable. She was very dedicated to her career, and evidence at the scene strongly suggested an abduction. When asked, Jodi's boss Doug said, "I have a feeling it's somebody that Jodi knew and trusted. That's my gut feeling." And this is a very popular theory, especially with those suspicious of her friendship with John Vansice. Could one of Jodi's friends or acquaintances have taken her? Maybe there was a conflict with the person staying with Jodi at her apartment. Assuming that they weren't already leaving with her, there is just such a short distance between her building and her car that any outside attacker would have had needed to be poised and ready, prepared and quick to act as soon as she stepped out of that apartment. Perhaps it had been someone completely unknown to her, an obsessed fan or angry critic. The strange phone calls and the feelings that she had about being followed seemed to support this idea, but police downplayed this theory repeatedly. Some people theorized that she had uncovered dangerous information during her work at the news station, even alleging that while reporting on a friend's death that she had upset someone. Her briefcase, also sometimes referred to as her canvas tote bag, is also still missing, which may have helped to fuel this theory. But after investigation, there was never any evidence uncovered to support it, and most of Jodi's work was as an anchor at the news desk, not in the field, uncovering details as an investigative journalist. But so many theories and so many possibilities existed. Her family found it to be unbearable at times. Jodi's sister Joanne said, "I can't picture the terror that she must have experienced, and then I just get sick." The family cleaned out her place at the Key Apartments at the end of September, 3 months after she had been last seen. They kept her things, storing them with family and friends, holding on to hope that they would someday find Jodi and together find her a new place to live. A promising lead prompts authorities to search the ground behind a row of duck hunting cabins near Eagle Lake, about 30 miles outside of Mason City, but there was no evidence there. In early December, police searched 2 area dams, but again turned up nothing. And so winter came and went without Jodi. In May of 1996, nearly a year following Jodi's abduction, her family rallies a group of more than 100 volunteers to search the countryside outside of Mason City. They mark items found on the ground with little flags and work with a police liaison to target potential evidence. But after only a few days, police announced that nothing promising was found. In the first few years of this long investigation, authorities conducted more than 1,000 interviews. Many people are looked at in this case, but the first public person of interest does not come to light until 1997. 2 years after her disappearance, Tony Jackson becomes a person of interest in Jodi's case. He was charged with the rapes of several women in the Minneapolis area. Detectives learned that he had lived only 2 blocks from KIMT in 1995 and had expressed an interest in broadcast journalism to his friends. At one point, a former cellmate of Jackson's claimed that Jackson had written about the location of Jodi's body in a rap song. But a search of the area referenced turned up no evidence. Jackson was a dangerous serial rapist, but he had an alibi for the time of Jodi's abduction, and police eventually ruled him out as a suspect in her case. The publicity surrounding Jodi's disappearance brought in many leads for police, but it also had its disadvantages. Cindy Sweeney told authorities that as a young teenager, she had witnessed Jodi's murder at the hands of 6 individuals. She described the scene and aftermath in vivid detail to police, as well as 2 Minnesota TV stations, before recanting her story. Authorities were unable to corroborate any of her claims, and she was sentenced to 30 days in jail for providing false information. Jodi was declared legally dead in 2001, but her story continued to capture the attention of the people of Mason City and all across the country. In 2008, 84 photocopied pages from Jodi's journal were sent anonymously to the Mason City Globe-Gazette. The journal had been taken as evidence from Jodi's apartment in the first days of the investigation and had never even been shared with her family. Jodi had started the journal in early 1994 as part of a personal improvement, professional success program. She wrote about her work and career goals. It wasn't a typical diary about relationships or love interests. Only select members of the police department had access to this journal. Why would one of them decide to share it with the public, and why now? An investigation found that Cheryl Ellingson, wife of former Mason City Police Chief David Ellingson, had chosen to send the journal to local press. The chief had apparently taken a copy of the journal home with him when he was clearing out his office after resigning from the department 2 years beforehand. Why did Cheryl release the document? Well, we still really don't know. Apparently, she thought that it was something the public deserved to see. Neither Cheryl nor her husband, Chief Ellingson, have faced any consequences for its release. Unfortunately, this is not the first issue that arises with the police department. Just a few years later, allegations that police officers were actually involved with Jodi's abduction and murder will come from within the Mason City Police Department itself. It's sort of complicated, but Mason City Police Officer Maria Ull shared during a deposition that she had received information from multiple informants that alleged the involvement of 2 Mason City police officers and an Iowa DCI agent in Jodi's case. One informant had come to her in 2009 when she responded to a call for a fight downtown, and another informant had come to her after he believed that his previous reports to the department through official channels were being ignored. And this person was actually Maria's brother-in-law, Reverend Shane Philpott. And it's true, there were no records found of Reverend Philpott's first few calls to officials regarding Jodi's case. He says that he had reached out to the department after receiving a call from a man who claimed to have information on the disappearance and death of Jodi. The caller said because his information incriminated Mason City police officers that he didn't want to meet or talk with local authorities. Instead, he had chosen to contact the Reverend after watching his television program. Reverend Philpott takes this call and decides that he will pass the information on to the police. But the officer who took Reverend Philpott's initial call to the station is Lieutenant Frank Stearns, one of the allegedly crooked cops involved in the case. And when the Reverend follows up with police months later, he's told that his information is just not credible. So he talks to Maria, his sister-in-law and a 10-year veteran on the force, and she takes it upon herself to investigate some of these informants' claims on her own. But doing this gets Maria fired. She goes to the press with her allegations and sues the city for wrongful termination. Eventually, that case is settled, and Maria is awarded $95,000. But the city continues to deny any wrongdoing, and the 3 officials accused of involvement in Jodi's murder also vehemently deny any wrongdoing. These rumors and allegations, particularly those against Frank Stearns, continue to perpetuate even today. Maria's allegations came out in 2011, but this is a Find Jodi billboard vandalized in 2020. Someone used spray paint to write Frank Stearns on it, as well as the words machine shed, perhaps to imply that Jodi's body is in or near a machine shed thanks to Frank. It's hard to evaluate claims like this against police, when the police also hold the keys to the public narrative about the case. Certainly, it sounds suspicious that they would fire a whistleblower while the accused remains on the force. But at the same time, the rumors surrounding a potential motive for the murder in this theory is again that through her work, Jodi uncovered some secret that the cops wanted to keep quiet. It comes back to Jodi's missing briefcase. Yet, Jodi was not an investigative journalist. She was the morning news anchor, and she worked with Amy to write up the program each morning. Wouldn't Amy or someone else have had access to this evidence? Law enforcement in Mason City do continue to actively investigate Jodi's case. Court documents show that in 2017, police requested GPS data for a 1999 Honda Civic and a 2013 GMC belonging to Jodi's friend, John Vansice. He's living in Arizona by this time, and these vehicles weren't around during Jodi's abduction. In fact, they were made years afterwards. But for some reason, authorities wanted to know where they had been. Mason City Police Chief Jeff Brinkley said that he can't discuss why the two vehicles are important to the case, but speculation is that maybe John knows where Jodi's body is and has returned to that location more recently. Of course, if that were true, there probably would have been a discovery and an arrest in the 5 years since this GPS data was turned over. And there hasn't been. To this day, no one has been named a suspect in Jodi's mysterious disappearance. Despite the many, many theories, not one has been proven, and no one has been matched to the palm print or the hair found that morning. If you know anything, please call the Mason City Police Department or visit findjodi.com.